Open Knowledge Foundation, which led in creating the world of open data, which I'm so proud about. But it's just, we're here today to talk about open science is the new normal. And I'm just so pleased to see so many of you choosing to come to this session. And please, people who are standing at the door, stay with us because you're so welcome, although you can't come into the room, but it's great to have you here too. And also all our online listeners and people who would like to give some questions as well. So without much further ado, I want to introduce our panel, which is just fantastic. We have, and I think you've all got the bios in your book, but I would just want to kind of keep it on first name level so that we keep it as quite informal as possible. It's an intimate gathering. It's good to do that. I'd like to welcome Jens. You're here because of you are a data producer. Strauss, you're here because you're a data service provider. And Carl, you're here because you are a data user. And between our three eminent speakers today and panel contributors, I think we're going to have a very interesting discussion about what is open science is the new normal. So we're going to start with a video, and this is from the European Open Science Cloud. I'm told the acronym is EOSC. You can tell it, EOSC. EOSC, I got it right. I was told to say European Open Science Cloud, so you got it to know what it was. So let's listen to this video and reflect a little bit on what is said, and then we'll come to our panelists who'll make several contributions, and then we'll get yourself, people online through Slido as well, to be able to contribute. So thank you so much. Over to the video. And if it works, let's see.
Many of you will remember that we had a problem with the ozone going away, which has been sort of solved, but we also know and realize now that stratospheric ozone is actually influencing regional climate change.
We asked to answer questions that are linked to major environmental challenges, such as what's the effect of global change on natural services, water quality, habitat species.
Every day, 4,000 Europeans die of cancer, 3 every minute. To reduce this number to 0 is a big challenge that can only be addressed by innovative solutions to be developed in an international, interdisciplinary, collaborative effort.
I don't have access to similar research to mine that is being published by other researchers, and thus many times I have to duplicate the research of other people in order to produce the dataset.
We are working with Earth observation satellite data in order to understand global environmental processes and how climate change is affecting our environment. The main challenge is that our data are becoming more and more complex, and the volume of our data sets become more and more larger.
It is becoming increasingly difficult to manage data created at high brilliance facilities. Large data volumes are difficult to manage from the perspective of both individual user groups and of the facilities themselves.
We generate enormous amount of data when we simulate the proteins that are mutated in cancer. After we do the simulation, we have the potential to analyze them and discover new candidate drugs. After that, we publish our research, but unfortunately, there are no open repositories that we can deposit these datasets so that other scientists can analyze the research.
So searching for and sifting through literature in the different disciplines can be very challenging, even if the technologies used in the two disciplines are similar.
EOSC can help me store my data, it can help me manage it, analyze it, and most importantly, to share it with other researchers.
The European Open Science Cloud can help ecological data-intensive research to be most successful by making available large amounts of datasets and new types of data, code and methods that go beyond the field-based scale studies in time and space.
The ability to deliver data and data services via a common portal with federated authentication will be a real benefit for all research infrastructures. This will enable improvements in data management, and increasing the use of fair data will benefit both facilities and facility users.
The EOS would offer cultural heritage institutions a platform for sharing collections-based data, which would enable epidemiological studies that could either be related to ultramarine disease or any other degradation phenomenon or conditions-based inquiry. And I think that this would facilitate improved care for cultural heritage worldwide.
It will combine a lot of often complicated tools in a single working environment, and then bring together people who are working on separate projects by all directing the effort into a common solution.
EOSC will help to drive open science and to facilitate open access by promoting the cooperation between all the open data infrastructure. With EOSC and with more open data available, we will be able to transform big data into better health.
EOSC will enable the reuse of data so that science will become open, data will be open, and this will impact the lives of citizens because we will be able to create more products more efficiently from the time and cost benefit.
The European Open Science Cloud will enable and drive FAIR principles. From a FAIR perspective, interoperable enables interdisciplinary research, allowing users from one area to access and use data from another, and in many cases analyse multiple data sets from different domains together. This capability adds scientific value and enables discovery.
EOSC can boost interdisciplinary research in Europe by encouraging, sharing and safeguarding fair research data across all disciplines. And this will assist in the validation of data and also accelerate innovation by improving both the use and reuse of data in the future through the mitigation of data loss.
The way we do science is changing, and the scientific method itself is demanding more transparency and accountability of research. One way to go towards these changes is to make our research more reproducible, especially more computational reproducible, and the EOS can help us in this process.
Data become the more valuable the more people work with the one and the same data set. And the same applies for the software.
From data to knowledge is our motto.
So, we have heard from a number of different European scientists about the importance of the European Open Science Cloud. And now we have three speakers to talk about what it is that we make open science as the new normal. I want to also just mention again, Slido, anybody has questions that wants to put that to our panelists, please put them down, and also we'll have an opportunity for the audience to ask questions too. But I'm going to turn to our panelists and pose the question, open science is the new normal. What will it look like and why does it matter? And Carl, I think you're the first to answer that question. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. But I'm going to answer the whole question is another question in itself, but I try at least to give a start of a discussion. And as part of that start, I think it's worthwhile giving some definition of open science. You do not have to agree with my definition. This is the definition we use in the Netherlands, but then at least you know what I talk about if I use the word open science. So this was the list we got as the European Open Science Policy Platform from the Commission as items on our agenda. These were the 8 items in black, and I added 2 in red because I think they are important and I like the number 10. But I cannot remember this list. This is too long, this is too complicated, and I have to look it up all the time. So what is open science? This is this list. No, I decided to make a picture of it because that's much easier to put in my head. And the picture starts with the science as it is, or as it was, because we are already developing a long time in this domain, and I call it, for this discussion today, Science 1.0. And the other end of the spectrum, there's of course where we want to go, and for the discussion I just call it today Science 2.0. And what is in between is what I would call open science. There are 3 main developments. One is the development towards more, and as far as I'm concerned, 100% open access of the scientific output in publications, in any form, in any format. The second one, more elaborate, more difficult, more time and money consuming, will be the movement towards fair data. You've just heard the acronym. FAIR is not an English word here. FAIR, therefore it's in capitals, is an acronym standing for findable, accessible, interoperable and reusable. It's a set of principles. It's not a set of standards yet. That's the next step that's being worked on. And the third development is towards more citizen science, the involvement of basically everybody into the scientific process, either as contributing to it or asking questions or, let's say, monitoring the output or working with the output in one way or another. There are, of course, a number of boundary conditions to get from left to the right, and these 3 are very often included in, let's say, a sort of definition of open science. We need other skills. We need other skills, especially in the data area. We need other, let's say, reward systems. If we keep on rewarding scientists the way we're doing normally, there is not a standard system, but there's a lot of dominance in the number of publications and number of citations. And if we keep on calling these important, then this development will not happen in this way. And the third dimension, or the third boundary condition, is metrics. We need to be able to monitor where we're going and how far we are. Not metrics to judge the scientists, but metrics to organize, to judge the whole organization, let's say a university or a country, on its way towards what I call Science 2.0. This total set is what I call open science. For me, open science is a transition. We have to stimulate it, we have to support it, but open science is not the ultimate goal, because then we will just call it science again. If we all work according to this new set of, let's say, principles, if this would be the new normal already, then the word open can disappear, and it is just science again. How will this develop? Well, I've made a picture. We never will reach 100% of open science. It doesn't exist, of course. So it's an asymptotic curve. And this was when I made this picture, somewhere in the beginning of 2019 or something like that. And I asked the, let's say, steering committee in the Netherlands, where do you want to put your money? Do we want to work on the development towards 2060 or 2050? Or 2040, and of course they said 2030 because they're politicians. But there was no 2021 on the screen, otherwise they would have chosen that. So I deliberately said, let's then work on the time frame of 2020-2030, and that's what we have decided to do in the Netherlands as our next phase towards open science. If you look at research in the dimension of either curiosity-driven at the one extreme or completely usefulness-driven at the other end, then you could draw a curve like this, where the amount of research is plotted, and most of the research is somewhere in between pure curiosity-driven and pure usefulness-driven. So this is the driving force for research. If we look at practice, then you could also make such a graph, from early stage developments to mature stage, which are dying at the end. Also something like a bell curve. And so what are we doing this for? We are doing this for the following reason. We would like to speed up the process of information with respect to publications, to data, to designs. And for me, data is also software. It's not only the numbers, it's also pictures, it's also videos, it's all the data, everything you can put into a digital object. And of course, in order to speed this process up, something has to come back in order to make the circle go round. These are the experiences from practice, these are the grand challenges. So moving faster through the chain of developments in the research, as well as towards, let's say, the possible use of applications, if we would speed up this process of information exchange from the left to the right. one more word on, let's say, the difference between open data, a word very often used, and fair data. Fair data, as we just said, and as you saw in the video, is findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. The accessibility can mean that it's not accessible for everybody, or not accessible yet, or not accessible for free. So in the accessible, you can define what you mean by accessible. Interoperable means that you can use it in order to integrate it with other data sets. And of course, as scientists, what we would like to do is to make as much of our data open as well. So our development should be fair data as a first rule, needed also for EOSC, and as open as possible. As fair as possible, as open as possible. These are the two things I would like to bring to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jens. That's great. And to start us thinking about what the definition is as you see it, and also learning a bit about what you're doing in the Netherlands too is fascinating. Now, Jens, how are you going to look at this question? And maybe as you are one of the data producers, over to you.
Thank you, Carol, and thank you for a clear perspective on what open science could be. I imagine that what we have been trying in Denmark since 2017 is to give our version of what open science would be for us. We were looking at Canada and the UK and saw in 2017 some early initiatives being taken on open science, and we came to the conclusion that we had the opportunity to drive sort of a bottom-up approach in which we took a new take on how we could engage industries, companies in Denmark and our Danish universities and approach scientific questions within the area of this omnipresent usage of polymers, plastics that we are facing right now, and see if we can tackle some of those scientific questions for the benefit of the companies involved and also for the scientists, because they want to do some great science. There was another movement in Denmark at the time that also encouraged us to look into open science, and that was sort of the problem that we saw in the protectionism that we see in academia and industry. When you want to collaborate, if we can open that collaboration up further, we could accelerate it, as you illustrated, and we wanted to take this focus on polymers and use that as a driver to test out a new setup in which we were bringing partners together. I've tried to sketch our project here on this very busy slide. Essentially what is going on is on the lower left side you have the closed ordinary science as we talk about in Science 0.1. And then on the upper right corner, you have the Science 2.0 version, in which we hopefully accelerate the research and innovation. And in the center of this slide, we see the university and our main contributors, the scientists and the students. And since this was a bottom-up initiative, what we used was students, good and skilled students, to identify together with researchers fundamental scientific questions, and then expose company partners to these fundamental questions, say, well, is this what we should spend our time on? And then the companies will come back to us, no, you know, guys, this is really not that smart because our value chain looks differently, so we need to adjust this a little bit. And then we will modify the definitions of these projects and try to run them in such an open fashion as outlined in this scheme here. We learned a lot from this process. We also learned that the first initiative was not the best one and that it needed to be modified, but I'm here to bring that knowledge to the table. That's the purpose of me being here today.
Thank you, Jens. Thank you. And last but not least, Shreyas, you're coming from a perspective of a data service provider, so it's interesting to hear your perspective too.
Well, thank you very much, Catherine, and thank you all for your perspective so far, and thank you to the Director General team for organising this and for the invitation. So I work with a company called Sparrow, but I'll just reflect for a moment on some of the things we heard in the video earlier. I started my research career doing my PhD in the life sciences field in cancer research in the UK, and I think that's the point at which I guess the passion for open science was really something that came to me, because we were doing a lot of work that was really based on the foundation of open genome databases, annotated genome databases, structural protein databases that I guess some of the people who are pioneering open science before it was called open science had already put together. And with that experience, I guess in many ways, as students, we were taking it for granted, that these things existed. Every day we were able to access them. We weren't necessarily dependent on, having to buy access to information that, of course, as students, we tend not to do enough and recognize the value of. So from that point of view, I guess that as I moved from academia to working more with startup companies, and Sparrow I'm representing today is a technology startup, and with corporate innovators, so large companies who are trying to use, again, the kind of outputs that we were talking about from the Sustainable Materials project. I guess I sort of saw a shift in the perspective. Open can be really, really valuable if you can see the value in it, but it can also be really scary if you can't see the value in it, and there are a lot of barriers to getting there. So just reflecting on maybe another way of thinking about how open could be in the future. It's not a framework that's as well thought through as the FAIR framework, or it's been assessed, but I think it takes a private sector view into account as well as an academic perspective. And broken this down into a couple of sections, and I think Carol spoke quite a lot about the first area there, so I won't go too much into it. So this idea of open access, how do we make essentially the scientific methods scalable for the 21st century? How do we have our hypotheses, our research protocols, data sets, methods of analysis as openly available as possible, so that other people can get access to those, and they could be findable. I think one of the other challenges, and that's why we've slightly modified this to accessible, and that's really what Sparrow, the company I'm working with, is focused on, is, okay, we've got a lot of research data out there that's accessible if the open access movement proceeds, and if EOSC is able to host a majority of the content out there, and partners around the world can do that too. But by some measures, there were some 2 million research articles published last year. Just making it findable, it doesn't mean it's simply something you can search for. You have to know what you're searching for. Maybe can we make it discoverable? Can we make it accessible to the range of people who need to get hold of it? That's a new technological problem, something that maybe Netflix does better than a lot of scientists do. Then there's a question of evaluation. Okay, we have the quantity, but what about the quality? A lot of research that's out there maybe is based on data sets that aren't very comparable with each other. We need to know that. A lot of research out there perhaps is a statistical anomaly that has been reported because it was interesting. Could we be publishing all the null results that are out there? Could we be doing the replication studies, incentivizing those so that we can have an unbiased, accurate, representative view of what data is leading us to, what the conclusions that we can actually draw, what is evidenced, and opening that up in a way that's perhaps more suited to 21st century science. Open participation, and this is where I think the perspective maybe for the private sector comes in, and also from the individual. So when we're doing research that involves public health data, personal data, maybe we're doing research, psychological research or something like that, which involves personal social media data, things like that, could be identifiable. How do we give people the chance to contribute, but not in a way that means that open just means, oh, all of my data's out there, it's out there, it's permanent, I can't get it back. And the same is true for the private sector. People have been trained to think of proprietary data that private companies own as a source of competitive advantage. Is there a way to encourage people to see the value of openness and contribute as much as they can or they should without the fear of losing that advantage? Historically, the patent system has been an attempt to do that, to disclose that information in return for protection. Maybe there are some other ways we can think of making that work, and other incentives. If there are any research funders around today, and the idea of having more democratic approaches to funding of research, especially when you have special interest groups, patient groups, people who are fundamentally interested in a piece of research, and there isn't a charity already in place to fund that, can we explore hybrid models in that way? And that would then lead to citizen science in a broader sense. And then there's a question of governance. So in terms of research and data ethics, in terms of the standards that the EOSC would have to establish, in terms of the stakeholder communities, and I'll come on to that in a moment, who we might want to consult, but not just in a sort of one-off approach. And lastly, mechanisms, incentives. Not necessarily financial incentives, they could be, to encourage people to share and make use of services on these platforms. So the way in which we kind of think about stakeholder communities at Sparrow is sort of broken up into these three chunks. There are the people who I think we've spoken about most so far, the research scientists. I won't kind of go into that further, but these are the people who are making use of the services that are in the EOSC system and other similar systems directly. Then there are people who are in other fields, and I think this comes back to what Jens was talking about, people who are making use of applying some of this research, the practice, I think, on the bell curves. And these could be people who are doctors, there could be investors in technology. And lastly, we have the connected public, the citizens who are paying for the research, the consumers who are buying the technology products that come out of it, the patients who are making use of the healthcare outcomes. And we try and think about these three groups and their needs in parallel, and not just focus on the scientists alone, even though that was the origin of Sparrow's company. So the sorts of questions that people are asking, some examples there we were trying to address. What are the latest breakthroughs in my field is where we started. How do I get recommended products, recommended publications that I should be reading? Then we thought a little bit more about how do we communicate with doctors about what they need to read. But they don't necessarily have the time to go into the detail that a lot of the other scientists have. And of course, there's the public. If you're a patient and you've got a health condition, don't you have a right to at least be able to be given some kind of understanding of what the latest science is? Now, it may not be the level of detail that a scientist would go into, but at least a route to be able to go as far as you're able to. And I think this is something that, as scientists, we feel we want the public to be able to have, right? Yeah. We don't necessarily have the tools to provide it. So we've created a set of tools that live along this spectrum that are attempts to address some of these challenges. Our aggregation platform has about 60 million articles on it, quite a large chunk of what's out there, constantly being updated, that you can search for. That's the basis of what we call aggregation, that's really focused at the scientists. Then we have curated articles, which is maybe focused a little bit more on those professionals who don't have the time to make their own lists of key reading materials, that we have in part been able to automate through our recommendation engine. And then summarization, and translation, I think, is part of that, making this accessible to people who don't have the necessary scientific knowledge to get into some of the details there, but are actually very engaged members of the public. And we use what we call our 3-minute digest, so being able to learn about a new topic in 3 minutes, which is a partnership between the science community on our platform, who actually came to use the aggregation tools and the curation tools, but stayed because some of them were motivated to be better science communicators, and they work with our editorial team to be able to produce that. And again, all of these things are intended to be scalable. They're either technology-based solutions, community-based solutions, and things that we can do in partnership, so we're not a bottleneck in that process. So with that, I'll leave it there and pass it back to you.
Thank you. So, audience, you've heard from 3 very different perspectives, or similar in some ways, but giving just that fresh view and perspective. It's really over to you and any Slido. Is there any Slido questions? Who was meant to be doing the Slido? Nope.
Not yet.
Oh, here we go. Welcome to... questions are more, yeah, we've got it up there, that's great. Okay, it says, all right, that's fine. Good. So, audience, is there anything you want to ask so far before I go and ask the panel more questions? Yes, if you say your name, that'd be great, so people have a background. And is there a mic? I have to say, I'm so glad that loud noise has stopped. I was thinking at 11:30 there's going to be another person speaking and we wouldn't be able to hear ourselves, so that's very good. There we go, hear from you and then we'll take that question. Thanks.
Thanks very much for your presentations. Nick Brunsveld from the University of Amsterdam. Short question, what's Sparrow's business model?
It's a good question. And so I think when we started off, the focus was definitely on trying to create tools for researchers. I think that the challenge is, of course, as I said before, when I was a research student, there were things that were paid for by me by university, and there are things which we didn't pay for directly as subscriptions as individuals. So it can be a little bit challenging to finance that. And actually, our hope has been to keep some of those research tools freely available for scientists to be on the community. so that we don't charge in that way. And actually, more of our focus has been sort of towards the right-hand side of that last diagram. So when we have summarization tools and we have a group of people who want to communicate, say, a new area of health awareness or something like that, they're essentially paying for communication services. So the whole thing is financed off the back of that. That seems to be scalable at the moment, the way in which we do it. But the idea is to, again, keep the community growing with as few barriers as possible, so we don't charge for use at the scientist level, but charge for people who are in that area. So, but it is intended to be a private sector model rather than a grant-funded approach.
So would you be open to offers from elsewhere?
Can't hear you.
Yeah. Would you be open to offers from the big tech companies?
I think if it's in the spirit of openness and democratization that we've been pursuing so far, I think it's interesting.
Have you seen the spirit of openness and democracy in the big tech companies?
I think there's definitely been a shift among the people we speak to in the last few years between, I guess, open access being a niche thing that certain research councils are mandating to this is the future and we just have to find a way to make that transition. So I think there are individuals who have that view.
The question comes from the concern that the big tech might put researchers in another lock-in like they did with the publications, right? Where we have to pay to get our own information back. And we would be worried to see that we would have to pay to get our own data back, where they do some stuff with algorithms that are not open and then ask us to pay for the retrieval of our own data.
I think one of the interesting opportunities we have right now is, if we have something like EOSC that isn't just for public sector, but actually is open to private sector groups, and we're able to develop that quickly, then it would be easier for those organizations to move on to this platform, which already has that governance in place, rather than trying to maintain things in separate sort of places that we can't see. I think it's a very important concern, definitely.
Okay, do you want to come in?
No, it's
fine. Are you all right? Okay.
Yeah, I'm fine. Thanks.
I'm just looking at some of the questions down here. Well, we take the one of, in a world where science is truly global, how can EOSC help open science beyond Europe's borders? Does anyone in the panel want to answer that question?
Yeah, I'm the chairman of the executive board of EOSC here in Europe, so I'm supposed to know something about this. But EOSC is set up initially for the science, but this is initially, and EOSC is set up initially in Europe. This is initially. There's no use in making a, let's say, federated structure of public data sources in Europe if it then doesn't communicate with the rest of the world. Absolutely no use, because researchers work together with other researchers all over the world, and research reaches all places of the world, also in the practice. So the ultimate aim of EOSC is, of course, and we are already discussing this with the United States and with Asia, with Australia, with Canada, so many other places in the world, that this will be a system that is linked into another set of systems on a global scale, and that is also open. I say ultimately because we want to start with the, let's say, public-funded type of thing. It should be a public thing and not a big tech thing from the very beginning. So it should not be a vendor locked-in type of approach. But ultimately, of course, companies should be able to join under the conditions that are going to be set for EOSC. And if they don't meet these conditions, they cannot join. If you want to, I can also cover one of the other questions, because another question is why should R&D organizations of companies be interested in this? Well, the answer is very simple. I tell the R&D organizations of the companies, I ask them the very simple question. Do you have another internet protocol than we use? We use the TCP/ICP protocol. Do you use the same? And then they look at me strangely as if I come from another planet, because of course they're using the same protocol, otherwise they would not be on the internet. I said, well, if you're going to use the same protocol we are going to use for sharing data, I'm sure you will be interested to share the data we have and combine it with your data that may not be open. You're not asked to put your data open, but if you're not going to make your data fair, and if not, you're not going to join EOSC, you cannot enjoy the benefits of the open data that are out there and that are fair. And then all of a sudden they understand, and they are very, very interested.
Now, there are two questions at the back, two hands. If you just wait till we get you the mic, that's great. And please say who you are. and ask your question. Great.
Good morning. My name is Eva Hnatkova. I'm the current president of the European Council of Doctoral Candidates and Junior Researchers, and we have been supporting the Open Science Initiative since a long time. However, we have issue for early careers researcher or general researcher. They are still not aware. Most of them are still not aware about what is it open science. So my question will be how we can train the new generation for open science. What can be done? Thank you.
We take the two questions together. Just pass the mic, and then so what can be done for open science? Great. Say your name and where you're from.
Sure. Good morning. My name is Spring Gombe. I work for the Drugs for Neglected Diseases Initiative. We do use open science for our early stage drug discovery, and it's been a boon. My question goes, however, to stewardship of data and thinking about this globally. We know that women, children, what are known as ethnic minority populations, but let's just say non-Caucasian populations are underrepresented in biomedical trials. So how do you make sure that the EOSC is not going to aggravate biases in data and biases in the way that we then develop policy coming out of data and products coming out of data, and that it really incorporates everybody everywhere?
Thank you. Right, we've got two questions there. Who would like to start?
We'll maybe one for Jens.
Jens.
Yes, that's great. I was considering our own project, and from that project, it was starting out as a grassroots project, a bottom-up project. And what we have been struggling with in that project over the last 2 years is scientific base. You need a certain critical level of scientific base in order to maintain interest from all stakeholders. I'm really excited now because we have been able to also fund new fundamental science projects that was initiated within our Spoman project, thereby enabling us to initiate top-down projects by government funding. And I think it's essential that if we want to have success with open science, we understand how to initiate both bottom-up and top-down initiatives and find the balance between those two kinds of initiatives. I think that's essential.
What about the point you're making about bias? That was one of the main. But how do we address that? What's the ideas from the panel about that particular point of the question?
Yeah, maybe first going back a little bit to the first question, I think that the knowledge out there with respect to open science and EOSC is by far not enough. So what we should do is have in every research performing organization at least one person responsible for seeing to it that the knowledge gets there and that people get to know what is needed, what its developments are, and what is possible. With respect to the bias in the data set that are going to, let's say, be combined, EOSC is not going to be a big set of data. EOSC is not going to collect data. EOSC is going to connect data. EOSC is going to make it possible for researchers to find data. Think about my own discipline, scale up and scale down of biotechnological processes. In my whole lifetime, I cannot read what appears in 1 year of publications. So I need machines to help me to find the right set of publications, to find, ultimately, if you would have data, the right set of data. And as you rightfully said, it's no use if humans can do it. It has to be machine actionable. Otherwise, it's of no use. We're talking about petabytes, exabytes of data. Nonsense to think about that as human beings to handle them. And with respect to the bias, there is no bias as far as EOSC is concerned because everybody joining EOSC will join their data. And if there's bias in those data, yes, then maybe it may be visible earlier than it was before, and maybe that will help.
Yes.
Maybe I would like to add one single point with respect to the data sharing. You might get the impression that we should just give all data to everybody. But we learned from the astronomers in their search for exoplanets that sometimes when you gather data and you just scatter them around, there's a very good and sound scientific idea behind the fact that you actually track who has access to which data. Because when you find an error in your data, all the models that have been based on those data are erroneous. So you need to correct those kind of errors, and you can only do that if you can track who used the data. So from a scientific point of view, quality and professionalism about the uses of data is also needed.
I fully agree, and then it helps if the data stays where it is. And then you get access by software to the data. This is what we call a data train approach. And then you know who has access, and then you know who has used the data. So I fully agree.
To speak briefly to the bias point, I think it's such an important concern. I think that it's systematically ingrained, the way we do research, the infrastructure that we have in place, the capital, where it comes from, where the products that are at the end of the translational research process are sold. And I think that if we take a proactive approach to saying we're going to build something like a bioethics or data ethics governance into the infrastructure that we're building, it is a key part of that infrastructure in and of itself. And then the questions about, what are the data sets we're training models on? What are the populations we're running clinical trials on? Is that representative of the group that we want to be considering? Become something that we could systematically address every time we have a grant application or we are choosing to upload some data to a system from a new provider. I think if it becomes a bolt-on, an optional thing to talk about, then people won't talk about it when they have the influence to change things, and the bias will continue to persist.
Somebody up there.
Hello, my name is Katarina Shubakova. I'm from Simula, from an ICT research institute in Norway. My question is basically kind of an opinion from your side. There was an interesting article in The Atlantic last year saying that the scientific paper is dead. Basically, we're using the same medium from the 17th century in an age where there's an increasing number of data, and you have basically just a different type, PDF. So great examples were mentioned there, Mathematica or Jupyter, where you can basically go in and see the data, how it behaves, how you can reproduce it. I was wondering whether the IOSC is thinking about something like this, and whether it will be pushing on the European level to change basically how the scientific paper is perceived and how it is published. So, thank you.
So, good question. Is the scientific paper dead?
Not yet, but I agree with the people that say that is a most likely development in the future. I expect publications to become metadata with the data, and it's extremely important that we get the proper metadata out there in order to find the data. Now, on the other hand, I expect that interpreting data and some data for other users than scientists needs more than only the data sets and only the original material. And that interpretation, summarizing, as you called it, will be, I think, an essential part of it as well. But it could be that ultimately the publications are not the aim, the data sets are the aim, and the publication is a metadata, one of the metadata in the metadata set.
I think at the scientific paper in a little bit different way. The essential part of science is the peer review process. You are lifting the quality of the science by having your peers looking into the science and the results and the conclusions. And you cannot have data standing there alone. You need, as Carol just said, you need to have that comment coming along with the data. It is essential part of science, and it's that part of science that gives us the true insight to how the world is working, right? So we need to maintain that process. It might be shifted a little bit. I'm fully convinced about that, but that is the essential part, and we'll keep that for good.
I think that's really the key point. What is it we want to keep from the paper format, even if we've now lost the physical paper, the printing, it's all gone. Maybe we don't think the PDF format is as useful as actually having a large data set with appropriate metadata associated with it. The key benefit is really coming out of peer review. How do we trust this? How do we go about finding out what is well evidenced and what isn't? And one of the things that in the health field certainly we would go about doing first is read the systematic reviews and the meta-analysis before we go into the original research. And what you'll find in many cases is because the authors of the primary research have done that for different purposes, or because they haven't necessarily been aware of each other, the person who's writing this review will be forced to exclude the vast majority of research that's out there. I think there's a question about whether that investment in time could have been carried out differently if people were more aware of what was going on. But I think the actual activity of conducting that meta-analysis and that review might be a useful thing for other fields to consider, so that we do actually have a sense of what are the sets of data out there in a slightly higher level view before we go into any individual piece of research. So there's some value, I think, to be extracted from the format before we declare it dead.
I see two other people in the audience, but I see a Slido question coming up here, which I think we should include. So if I see two people here, so I will get back to you in 1 second. But I'm looking at the one at how to include open science practices into research rewarding system. What would you think about that question?
Well, as if it is excluded at this moment. The research rewarding systems are determined by the research performing organizations. And if you look at the different universities, they all do it differently. And even within a university, it's done differently in the different faculties, in the different disciplines. So yes, I think it's very important that we include the efforts people do with respect to, let's say, sharing their data, having open access publications, and reward them for that. But it's a matter of culture, a matter of attitude, and it doesn't need something particular except for good leadership.
Okay.
So you wouldn't see there being a kind of a mandate built into research grant funding in the way that we've currently got with open access publications?
That's not evaluating the researchers, that's evaluating the research proposals. And there I do agree. There the granting organizations. It's the same as if you evaluate a university. Again, there you can look at this. So that you can mandate, but for evaluating the researchers is up to the research performing organizations. And they should change their attitude.
Okay,
but I agree for the funds.
I agree.
Great. So, first questioner, can you tell us who you are?
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm Marvin Ulsbeek. I'm currently chairing the so-called European Researcher Group on Open Science Innovation. And I had a question about the EOSC project. And I'm wondering to what extent it's relevant for the so-called long tail of science. Because in many disciplines, most researchers do not produce huge data sets. And sometimes I feel those people, I don't share this perspective, but look at it at data management plans in general like an extra burden, not really relevant for what they are doing. So I would like to have first Carol's perspective on this, but perhaps the other people here perspective on it. Thank you very much. And
I saw another questioner here. If you just hand the mic. It's quite good to take a few questions at a time when a flurry of hands go up. It's wonderful. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Santi Reyo from La Paz University Hospital in Spain. My question is concerning the transition period between Science 0.1, Science 2.0, because for some countries we are already struggling with open science as researching costs increase. It's a lot of more expensive to publish in open, etc. And we have really issues with that. And we have to change the reward system. That's okay, but in the final, the open science will require repositories, data curators, data aggregators. There is a lot of infrastructure that many countries, many institutions in Europe will we have really problems to set up. How are you thinking that it's possible to reduce that threat of inequality or increase inequality in already an unequal continent?
Thank you. So, panelists, two different types of questions there. Who would like to start?
With respect to the long tail of science, I also sometimes use the word long tail of countries, which not everybody is happy about. But yes, there are some sciences like, let's call astronomy or high energy physics, where they already for a long time, and these are the big data producers, share these data, but only within their discipline, by the way, and not across disciplines. Definitely EOSC is looking at and aiming for all the researchers, for all the sciences, for all the, some people call sciences in the English term only the beta sciences. No, we're talking not only the hard science, we're talking social sciences, humanities, we're talking medical science, we're talking technical science, we're talking exact sciences. All these need to be included, and yes, you need help for that, especially in the domains where the abundance of data is not so large. People are not used to making research data management plan to look at how to make the data as fair as possible, etc. And therefore, data stewards come in. And we aim for, let's say, roughly, some people say this is too many, but 1 in 20 researchers needs a research assistant or a data steward. Of course, this is discipline dependent. These are not going to be supplied by EOSC or by Europe or whatever, but there will be stimulation programs, and there are stimulation programs in Europe, and hopefully in the countries. And ultimately, we will slightly spend our money differently. Rather than have PhD student number 21, we will have a data steward. And rather than have PhD student number 22, we will have the infrastructure in order to properly handle our data. But it, again, needs leadership.
And also the individual who's the data steward, the value to that as well, and how that would work too. That's something that's important, especially in an academic setting where so much is based on.
Yeah, but there are many examples where organizations already have a lot of data stewards. This is not a new thing. But for some of the sciences, this is not very common.
Yeah. And Sharon, I think that thing about in how you worked cross sector as well is really important and to get success. And I think you mentioned that about cross-collaborate and how that's fairly
For me, this is the ultimate aim. It's no use to share your data only within your own discipline.
Sure.
If we are not able to combine data sets over the boundaries of disciplines, we're not going to solve the world's problems.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe I would come with a different kind of motivation for the scientists at the universities. There's a crisis of the ability to replicate science, right?
Yeah.
And if you're a really good scientist, you should be able to replicate whatever you have published. And if you publish without your data, often this is becoming difficult. So that should be a very simple and straightforward motivation for scientists to accept that kind of cultural change that Carol is talking about.
Yeah. But how can the European Commission nudge as well? Sorry.
I think in both of these cases, there's an upfront cost question. Like, can we reduce the barriers for smaller parties to participate once the bigger organizations have set up the core of this? And maybe that's the question for slightly longer term. But I think the other question is, how are we defining waste? And replication is a good example of that. Not being able to collaborate across boundaries is another good example of that. Maybe fragmentation in the smaller fields, that individuals are quite far apart globally, maybe don't have the connections to each other. So I do wonder whether, when we do the sort of trade-off, and I think the Commission has done some analysis on this, cost-benefit analysis on how much would be saved overall by I guess, research councils and things like that. And was it 10 billion?
10 billion, yes.
10 billion.
The aim is, if we are not going to make our data fair, we will spend 10 billion euros per year more than we would spend if we would make our data fair. But this is in the long run if everything works.
Right.
Yes.
And of course you have the upfront costs and you need the investments to get the transition going. We're basically calculating those for the Netherlands at this moment. And I can tell you there's somewhere, I give you the broad range because there's different scenarios, between 5 million to 35 million per year for the next, let's say, 4 or 5 years for the transition. Ultimately, there will be no more money for science than there is. There is a certain amount of money for science, and with that we have to do it. And we simply have to do it in a different way. There will not be extra money because we stick the label open to it. It doesn't work that way. Otherwise, we would stick the next label to it.
I think we have to be able to find the value, the savings from that in line with the costs we're incurring. And maybe that's different for large organizations versus smaller ones or in fields which are on the, as you put it, the long tail.
It's also bringing the public with us on that journey as
true.
well. That's really important. I see somebody wanting to ask a question. Great.
Hello, my name is Vincent Gaillard, and I'm
Take the microphone,
Take the microphone.
please.
Hello, my name is Vincent Gaillard, and I represent the European University Association here. And so I have two comments/questions on what has been said. The first one relates to research assessments and the incentives for open science. So we have a big survey that we have conducted, and the report is going to be out in a few weeks at the International Open Access Week. So this is sneak preview.
Open Access Week, 21st to 27th of October, is that right?
October, yes, indeed.
Everyone,
so
I hope you're all going to be doing something for that.
Report. So what is important is that, however, no matter how much people, or many people are here actually and are interested in this session, in reality, what we can see is the practices of universities and the research assessment of individual researchers, research centers and units, and universities that relates maybe not more than ever, but still much on journal impact factors, citations, and standard Bible metrics. And open science is very low so open practices are not rewarded. So I would like to comment your comments on this, how we can change this, because we are very much interested in changing the practices. And the other one is on the data management and stewardship. I think that universities will have a key role to play there, because these will be new tracks and in the training. So universities will need to train those people, and then they will also have to hire those people after they've been trained. And so this is all new, even though there are indeed some institutions where it exists already, but it's not the norm. And if we want to go open science is the new normal, well, there is still a long way to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Somebody just put their hand up here. So I'll take the two questions together. Please say who you're... We'll get the mic down here. Thank you. So we've got two questions there.
I'm Jana Weidmann from the Norwegian Ministry of Education and Research. And I just wanted to say that also the ministry's has a place in this policy. And in Norway, this doesn't concern open access to data, but we have a policy that all publications should be open within 2024. And we also are stimulating this, and we are monitoring all universities as for whether they reach this goal. And we can see that they are doing considerable. Well, some are really in front. Yes.
Yes.
And that could also be done, I think, for open data in general. Thank you.
Thank you. So we've got two questions. I have to say it's wonderful. Everyone's coming in and some people are leaving, but our audience is still very full for those that can't see the audience. It's great. So those three questions. Well,
let me first give my compliments to the European University Association for all the work they do in this domain. They do good surveys. They stimulate this development. I'm part of the open science team of the UA, as you may know. And I think they are really into helping this development. And I do fully agree with you, we're not far enough and it's not moving fast enough. So everything we can do to enhance that will help. I can give you examples of my own university, but this is just an example. And what it should be an example of Europe and how we are developing there. I do agree that government can help. I was at our government yesterday in the same discussion, so they can put also pressure. Plan S will help in this development with respect to publications. But ultimately, it's the leadership of the research performing organizations that has to change their mindset and has to move into another direction. And if they're not going to do it, it's not going to work for the researchers and their evaluation. Also, EUA has shown in the meetings that it is the traditional researchers that are holding this back. The younger generation definitely wants to move in this direction, but very often they are held back by their peers, by their supervisors. Don't publish open access if it isn't absolutely needed, and be careful in sharing your data. So this type of attitude needs to change.
Thank you. It's cultural. We have to shift the culture.
It's cultural, absolutely.
It's very much culture. I fully agree, and in our Spoman project, what we have seen, it's culture all the way around.
Yeah.
It's culture among all participants, the lowest to the highest level, that needs to be put into a different perspective. I fully agree with you on that. Incentives are important here, and leadership has to step up and show how this need to be corrected. Yeah.
I guess if we think of this as a movement as well as a set of policies and a set of systems, then maybe we think a little bit more about motivations and less about practices. Maybe there are some countries that have made more progress that could share with us what is it that the leading institutions saw as valuable to contributing to open science. Was it simply that this was something that was mandated? Or actually could they see outcomes in specific projects, research projects, specific spheres of academia where there actually was a better outcome because people were sharing openly? And again, that's, from my point of view, that's something that I got an introduction to right at the beginning of my academic career. So I was already sold on it because I could see the value of these bioinformatics tools that would not have existed at all if were not for an open mentality around this. I realized that that's not the same in every sphere. Around health, we do have around genomics in particular, we do have a slightly different approach to thinking about what should and shouldn't be closed. And maybe that's something that's more generalizable. But I do wonder, Catherine, from organizations that do connect people together, best practice here that you're presenting, do you have a view on this?
So it's fascinating because when I'm thinking about some of the work we've been doing on frictionless data and about how giving tools and being open and this cultural aspect of what you've described about how do we change that, I think that there needs to be investment into, say, the work that we've been doing. We've been funded through the Sloan Foundation to look at frictionless data. So I've been, it's described to me as what shipping containers were to the shipping industry, frictionless data is to the data world. And so if we can get that right, just think about the cross-collaboration that could take place and how we can enable people and it all be open. And I think that's hugely exciting and where we need to drive to. I was going to actually ask our Norwegian friend here, you asked the question about what did you do to make those, you asked, was it legislative? Did they have to do it? Or is there almost a competition in terms of saying, look, this is what I'm doing, this is what we're doing, and therefore you get that buy-in because people want to do it and evidence it. So I'm just going to give you a chance to come back if you would like to. The mics are being held hostage at the back there. Mics forward, thank you. But these are good questions, and I think it's great when we can ask the audience to come back as well. It's wonderful. And I see the lady here.
I actually think it's a question of trust between the institutions and the ministry, that we're actually going in the same direction. And there is, of course, also a lot of resistance in the research among researchers, but I think we have got important people who are telling another story. I'm not into the individual stories or results here, but it would be very interesting actually to study, because there are several universities and also big universities where a really large amount of the publications are now open. And they are competing, yes, they are, because we encourage them in our yearly steering meetings. Yeah. We discuss this every time.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, I think culture change takes time, and it might be interesting to see what the tipping point is in the motivations.
That's an interesting.
I don't think it's so much that the researchers don't want their publications to be open. It's a matter of how and when and who's going to pay for it. Because researchers publish for others to read. Everything is open. Open access is basically a wrong term, because you can buy all the journals, so it is open. It's not for free. So there's a difference between open access for free and publication. Researchers are publishing for others to read. That's the first thing they want. So as soon as it's published, they would like all the world to read it. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's something else than open access and giving it for free to everybody.
Thank you. Now I've got two people on the floor. Oh, do you want to come back? Yes, come back. Yeah, no problem.
I just wanted to say that the ministry has also financially supported open access in a period.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Now we've got two hands just gone up. That's great. Well, you've been very patient. There we go. if you say your name.
Yes,
please.
hello, my name is Eva Stensköld and I work for the foundation in Sweden called Riksbankens Jubileumsfond, and we support research within social sciences and humanities. And I have a question regarding long-term preservation and archiving of research data in the EOSC, which is of course something fundamentally different than making data, storing data and making data accessible, especially when it comes to SSH data, which is sometimes 3D images of artifacts and audio-visual data. And I was curious about this aspect when it comes to the EOSC. So it's a very small question, but quite big anyway. So
yep.
If you can comment on that.
Well, just take the two. Is that okay, Carol? Yes, hi. Great to see you again.
Hello, Ludovic Tilly, chair of the Coimbra Group of Universities, 39 research-led universities. But actually the point here I'm going to make is as a researcher in my own experience. And I'm probably still among what you call these traditional researchers. That is, I'm still questioning myself about my how I should publish my own research and the ones from my PhD students. The reason being that in my personal career, I got some data stolen. A patent has been put with them, and I was just spoiled, basically. And then I had urgently to patent what has been not yet stolen. And therefore, I think that all this should go also together with ethics. The way we also all together, and not just the academics and researchers, but also all the other actors, somebody mentioned trust, for instance, between ministries and researchers, but there should be also trust among researchers and trust with all the other actors. Otherwise, indeed, it's not a win-win game in the end. Yeah. So I would like that, indeed, in the training of the young generation, there should be ethics as well.
Yeah, thank you. So two good points there. One about how we look at it in terms of an archivist point of view. Another, the same debate we're having about personal data and privacy, you're talking and ethics around that as well. There's something there too. So who would like to answer those questions?
I guess I'll sort of reflect on the point I made about ethics before, that I think if it's not built in as one of the fundamental parts of the infrastructure itself, and it won't be something that can build trust with enough parties to reach critical mass. So I think it's a fundamental problem. And we have separate issues of, is there bad data? Is there fraudulent data? Is there stolen data? I think they're all sort of slightly different problems and bias as well. But if we're not addressing these in a proactive way, then we'll reach the point where we're doing it in a very reactive way. That's not something that's going to build trust with anyone. I'll leave the archivist question to Carol.
Maybe I could comment a little bit on the archive question. Maybe in the open science or EOSC context, we should look a little bit on how the libraries are considering storage of data. They have been storing amounts of data, books, and now also digital data for years, and have a great experience on evaluating the lifetime of data. What is the lifetime of raw scientific data? What is the lifetime of proven high-quality data? And maybe we could gain some knowledge from that sector. I think that would be smart.
I would like to stress a few things again, because apparently it is not clear that EOSC is not going to store data. EOSC is not going to store data. EOSC is going to federate storage of data. So combine the existing storages. And the responsibility with respect to ethics, with respect to long-time preservation, is within the storage organizations. And EOSC could see to it that they only admit those organizations that make their data as fair as possible, that can guarantee a certain, let's say, residence time of the data, that can also guarantee that there is a peer reviewing of the data, etc. So these are what we call the rules of participation. We are developing those at the moment. So what will be the rules of participating in EOSC? Then with respect to the ethical aspect, I fully agree with you, but there is no essential difference between this new open science and the existing system. Now, you also have to care that your data are not being stolen. Apparently, you were unlucky and they were stolen. So also, in the future, data can be stolen, but will not, per definition, be stolen because they're not open. They are fair, they're not open. So it's up to you where you store them, how you store them, who has access. And if that organization cannot be trusted and the data disappear, okay, that's not how it should be, but that has nothing to do with open science or EOSC as such. So I do not see why you should not immediately put your publications in the open, because you know that it's going to be in the open, so you care for that beforehand. You look at possible implications for patenting. Now you also look at possible implications for patenting, but at another moment in time. The only difference is the moment in time when you realize, now I have to be careful, and now I have to look at a possible patented situation. This is the same, and you do not put it out there if you still want to patent, of course. So I really do not see the difference. There is no difference as far as I'm concerned. EOSC and open science is not putting everything out in the open. There's also a question with respect to privacy. Private data cannot be in open. My medical data will not be in the open. That doesn't mean they cannot be fair. That doesn't mean that I could not combine them with other data. That's another story.
Jens, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, I think it's wise to distinguish that.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, exactly.
and if you are a scientist, you should tag along with the good values of science.
Yes.
Openness, inclusiveness, respect for ideas and where the ideas come from. These are very fundamental principles of science, and people should acknowledge that whatever methodology are used in this context, that is something
I fully
else.
agree with him. So FAIR doesn't say anything about the quality of the data, doesn't say anything about the ethics, etc., etc. But these are things we should look for also now. It has nothing to do with open science as such.
Yeah.
Where do you think that should sit in the policy framework, Carol?
Sorry?
Whose responsibility should that be if it's not a
These rules
challenge to
of
the EOSC?
participation, you mean? Well, I have the feeling that within the rules of participation, some of these aspects can be, to a certain extent, be built in, and the awareness of organizations that join EOSC can be made higher if we put this in the rules of participation. But of course, EOSC cannot go around and check all the data of everybody. So that there needs to be systems, like there are now peer review systems, that need to do that.
Yes. Microphone. Get the gentleman here.
Thanks. So Alexander Blooms from the Latvian Ministry of Science and Education. So I have a question. So EOSC is not itself a cloud, and the aim is not to be European. So is there some? It's a little bit confusing for people who see the name EOSC. They just imagine it's something else. So is there any initiative to change the name, perhaps?
Very, 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 very good question, if I may immediately react. I've been telling the Commission from day one, and some people in the room know this, that this is the wrong name. It's not European, it's not open, it's not science, and it's not a cloud. But for the rest, it's fine. And I've given up. So I've said, well, this is the name chosen, and what we have to do is explain it, unfortunately. But yes, in the back, we now and then say, gradually we will change the name, because this is no good. Yeah, this is the way it is. I've given up. I've learned to live with it. This is what it is, and I'll just explain. It has to be worldwide ultimately, of course. This is the European part. It has to be more than science ultimately, of course. We start with science. It is not open. It's fair. That's for sure, because in our regulation it says. And it's not a cloud in a sense that it's a big set of data, but of course it's a connecting system. I'm sorry, I cannot be better than that.
So maybe if I can, does any of the panel want to add anything at the moment? Because I'm kind of clear that there's Slido comments, and also we need to get back to our question for this session, which is open science is the new normal. And I know we can get caught in the cloud stuff, but
yeah, we have to be careful. I'll disappear.
Not at all, not at all. But maybe we should just have a quick look at some of the questions that maybe we haven't had a wee look at. How to include opens, and we've said that. What happens with patent business? Well, that's back to the cloud. Maybe is there any more questions that maybe we can? Open data is good for fundamental research, but can create a competitive risk for EU or research of the economy. Don't play the same game. Same question. How will you harvest and implement good examples in open science implementation, open science trainings, public engagement? There's some things about that, about moving forward. You know, we've got this new Horizon Europe programme, a new parliament, new commission moving forward next 5 years, AI proposal coming through, all of these things linking to some of the things we've been talking about. Any of our panel want to, because I don't see any questions coming forward unless people are, I'll keep looking. Oh, there's somebody at the back there, great. Oh, two people at the back, wonderful. So while we're keeping a look at the Slido, would you like to ask your questions?
Sure. Hi, I'm Alice Meadows from ORCID, and I actually wanted to go back a little bit to the research and evaluation and recognition, really, for open science. One of the things ORCID tries to do is enable researchers to get recognition for their contributions of all sorts, but actually it's really hard. The reason the impact factor is still so prevalent is because that's super easy to measure. So I'd like to know what the panel has to think about sort of other ways of measuring openness that could actually be done, bearing in mind that one of the challenges once you start measuring something is that you potentially motivate behaviours that have unintended consequences.
Take the two together. You want to ask?
Yeah, okay.
Great.
Okay. Hello, my name is Yuji from city of Brno, Czech Republic. I would like to ask you, maybe you already mentioned it, but I was not here before. What about the connection of EOSC and Open Data, European Open Data Portal? It's the way that it can be, harvested together or something like that. Because from my point as a public administration officer, data are still the data, So if it is connected for the researchers and also for the science city initiatives, could be interesting. Thank you.
Okay, two questions there. Who would like to? Jens, do you want to start with this one?
The first one about how to put KPIs on scientists who are already measured a lot on the H indexes. As I said earlier, if we are having a crisis on reproducibility, why not measure on the ability to reproduce science? Maybe that's a good indicator. Otherwise, I would say, well, this is a cultural change again. That change takes time. That time is equal to the time it takes to the open access journals to reach the impact equivalent to the impact we see of the traditional science journals. We are under that way. And then eventually, together with management acknowledgement of a cultural change, the indicators will be there. I also think what actually motivates a scientist to go into a project when scientists in Aarhus in Denmark are becoming a part of our Spillman project and spend time and invest their time in discussing problems, it's because they expect to get that great idea popping up in their head. Right? So good science is about bringing people, bright people together, bright people from industry in our case, and bright people from universities. Let them spend time together and ideas will flourish. And if a scientist can see that he is in an open setup, open science setup can get even more output out of joining, then he will spend time on it. He's still hunting those funding resources. Yeah.
I think one of the challenges with research and innovation in general, whether that's academic research or more applied research, is that the outcomes, the value of it may not be evident for quite a number of years after it's published. So I think any method that's really fundamentally rooted at the point of publication, obviously citations take time to build up, misses some of the value in that. And I think replication being reproducibility being a fundamental part of it. I think it's perhaps a cliche to say that system evaluation is broken, and we need to find a new one. And I don't think we've necessarily reached a point where we can move to those new approaches. But I do wonder whether there is a slightly more objective, again, larger scale peer review approach one can take within a field to have an objective discussion around which research has really been reproducible and impactful to the nature of the field a number of years after it's published, rather than relying purely on metrics that don't capture those kinds of insights.
I would like to emphasize once again that it makes a difference whether you're evaluating an individual, a researcher, how he or she is doing, or whether you are evaluating a research proposal, or whether you are evaluating a university or research group. And so you have to clearly distinguish between these three uses of evaluation and let's say, rewarding. With respect to the first one, the researchers, because that's the core ultimately, if there everything would go all right, the other systems would sort of follow, but the other systems you can do a little bit more top-down. Very simple. look at how researchers are doing with respect to education, research, valorization or impact, leadership and organizational skills. Don't use numbers, compare them to the researchers in a comparable group. Simple as that.
Now, there's a question in Slido, and I thought from the last speaker when you said about you are from where in the, is it the Czech Republic you said? And you're from a town in the Czech Republic, is that right? Yes, it is. Okay, and there was a question that came up, I think we can get that up there, which was about cities and regions. Can we get that up there? There's a question that came up. I thought that was quite an interesting one about how do we look at that? How do we, is there an aspect of citizen science around that? This is something you were talking about, Shays, about how do you bring people together? Let's go. We got it. What can be the role of cities and municipalities in open science and how they can be involved? And I thought it was a nice linkage with what you were saying. So maybe, panel, have we got some thoughts about how do we do that? How do we bring the citizen along with us as well? And also, how do we tell the stories about some of the things we've been talking about, which sometimes can feel very complex, but actually there's a story behind that all, which is about how does it impact in your day-to-day life and why openness is so critical to that.
I think one of the things that's quite interesting is, cities, we talk about these cities that have a heritage of research and innovation, and often that is because there are some people who are doing great things that are in close proximity to each other, maybe not in the formal institutions that they work in, maybe not in even the disciplines that they work in, but just geographically, the city has been set up so they can move around and work with each other, and that encourages more people to come to those areas. And I think building those kinds of systems, learning how to build those from cities that have done it well in the past is an important part of just getting the basics of connecting people off the ground. But I think from the citizen science point of view, there are certain kinds of research activities that just can't be done with traditional approaches to data collection. It's just not cost effective. And each of us is carrying around, an increasing number of devices and tools to collect data, which we're using for consumer products and services like that, but actually could be very useful, and it is often very useful for large-scale research. So if we want to, as scientists, get access to that kind of data, how do we make a social contract, essentially, with the people who have been collecting that information, whether or not they're doing it deliberately or not, to be able to share that with them? What are we going to give back to them in return for them sharing their data point, if you will, or periodically sharing it? And I think, obviously, in health, that's something that people are more motivated to do, just because they can see that outcome. Can we do that for environmental monitoring? Can we do that for transport planning? When we have large populations, maybe we only want to model those flows. Are there other things that we can do which actually mimic what we do in health for spheres where maybe the general public is less aware of that value of the data that they already generate? I think that the last sort of leg of that is the citizen as a scientist. So, traditionally academia has, for good reasons and bad, excluded perhaps a large proportion of the population from participating in science. There are good reasons for that, around being able to ensure that the integrity of the research and the skills that are needed to conduct it are in place. There are bad reasons for that, around just perhaps a more elite academy in the way we think about it. If that's going to change in the future, I think being able to give people the simplest package of how do you conduct data collection activities sensibly, how do you propose to new hypotheses that you want tested, can there be a marketplace for funding of that, whether that's crowdfunding, general public as we would for a development of a new product on Kickstarter, or is it something which actually the research funders might be able to entertain more with the large blocks of funding that they traditionally give out on a platform that people experimenting with developing right now?
Or patient groups, or
indeed, yeah.
Yeah.
I think clinical trials is a really interesting example of that being quite successful already.
Do you have anything to say, Jens?
Yeah,
you come from our house. Our house is so progressive in so many ways. Your library is incredible. You do amazing things.
Yeah, I was thinking, very fundamentally to me, data is not interesting if the data are not being used by people. So that's essential. Yeah. And in that context, I was thinking back to the previous discussion on the ethics here. Maybe it's taking a little bit off into a tangent, but nevertheless, I think the great outcome of science is is the knowledge and the insight to technologies or in mechanisms and eventual technologies that comes out of science is a brilliant outcome of science. And the problem with or the good side of that is the increased health we all get out of it. The problem with this is also that there is a downside to some of these technologies, and maybe if you are able to engage people more in the consequences of new technologies, you could also use open science as a platform to talk about what is not only the good side of a new technology, but also the bad side of a new technology. It takes a while to recognize that the weaponization of robotics and social media is maybe not that intelligent, right? So so it's very nice to have open science as sort of a platform, or a place where you can sort of take this discussion. And that was maybe taking a little bit too far, but nevertheless.
No, but it's good to share. How do you have any comment?
Well, maybe a short answer to the question about open data. So far, there is no formal connection between open data and the European Open Science Cloud. Whether this ultimately should be is another question.
Yeah. So maybe something we have to come back to the Commission on as well. Very good. Yeah. Now, I'm looking at, it's about 12:25. We're kind of coming towards the end of the session, but we still have moment in time for people to ask questions, because one of the things I really think, how do we get there? How do we get open science to be the new normal? And how do we make that happen? And really asking yourselves as the audience, how do we do that is maybe quite a way to try and end the session in a very upbeat, positive note, so you all can go off into your own areas and communities and research institutions and make that your aim and mission to make open science the new normal. So how are we going to get there, and what does it require from all of us? What can we all do? You know, you've chosen to come to the session today, you've heard from the panellists, so what do you think we need to do? Maybe that's a question over to you, and everyone's sitting there, it's 12:25, we're all going maybe off to lunch, we're not thinking about this, but it's really important that we do think about how to make this the new normal.
Now it's about time you start answering the questions instead of giving it.
I know, we've got two people here.
I'm joking.
Yeah, the person that asked the first question is going to answer this question. Great, thank you.
Well, thanks very much.
Say your name again and where you're from.
Nick Brunsveld from the University of Amsterdam. Well, one of the questions on the competitive risks, I think it would help researchers and as institutions a lot if European Commission could give more insight into how we're going to prevent us from being crushed by the competition, because we are opening up our data and they are not.
We are making our data fair, we're not opening them up. I keep on repeating this.
The worry is that by granting access in one way or another, there might be things they can do that we're not sure of.
But the question I've asked you is, how do we get there? What do we do? I mean, we want open science, we want it because we know it's good, it's innovative. What do we do to get there?
We want more security about what's going to happen.
Security. Right, we've got one, and that's an answer. Right, who was wanting to ask? There was some back, the guy from the Czech Republic. Hello. Great.
Hello, maybe one thought about it. I think to make open science normal, we should maybe become more of a teachers, every one of us, because if you want to share the data and reuse them, so you have to teach a large audience, about the metadata. You have to describe it well and so on. So this is not what we are used to do, how to think from the beginning about how to reuse the data, So I was also always wondering, we should become more about like a teachers, to share this knowledge. So this is just
sharing knowledge, education, literacy.
Yeah. To be the researcher who wants to share the open research data, he should be more as a teacher.
Great.
This is what I meant with skills. So we have not only to improve, let's say, the number of data stewards to help us, but we also have to increase the skills of the researchers themselves. Yep.
And make those people valued as well. That's a value to that too.
Absolutely.
And I do wonder whether there's, a reward mechanism here. Again, it's something that you can think about different mechanisms for practically. If there's a researcher who's put data out, which other people are using in their publications, that they're getting some sort of credit. Right now, we create these enormous lists of authors to do large-scale research projects, and sometimes the individuals get lost in that, but actually some mechanism by which they can be recognized for the work that was done on the basis of that data, not that, just essentially to allow them to be comfortable sharing it and recognize that they will get benefits, rather than sort of hoarding it and saying, you've got to come to me to do any work on the basis of that. So I think something which sort of, tokenizes that benefit would be something that could help with the evaluation side of things.
So we've had security, education, literacy skills. Any other comments about how do we make it, how do we realise it, how do we get there? Great, a flurry of hands, yes. Hello, oh, you're just point, okay, yes.
Hi, I'm Melanie Imming from Surf, the Netherlands. I think it's really important to make it as easy as possible.
Okay.
That's it. So, I mean, if you look at certain domains that already do a great job, not only with sharing the data fairly, etc., but also in other ways, they have a lot of tools and a lot of automated things to help. And if you then just show researchers how to use those things, so connected to the training, of course they will do it. Yeah. So just make it as easy as possible.
Great. Thank you. Right, who was next? The
those here.
Gentleman here? Great. Can you pass the mic over? That's lovely. Thank you.
Well, I think, again, Santi from Madrid, Spain, I think one important thing is to advertise successful stories. I mean, scientists are moved fundamentally by pride, to be recognized. And this Science 2.0 it will require to them to learn new skills, to confront a different environment, to different search of data, etc. It will be difficult. So we need to reach them in the prestige aspect of, we have to move them in this advertise saying that guy is great because he's open, is putting their data fair, is using fair data from others, and is reaching success.
Cool. Thank you. Right. Okay, very lovely.
Maybe I can react to that. In our own university, we appoint data champions and open science scientist champions. So we put them on a platform and the result of that is that the interest enormously increases in the university.
So people are celebrated. That's cool. Yes.
Hi, Stefan Berkmans. I'm from Elsevier. And earlier I saw that you had a question about how open science can work also for the corporate and for companies.
I guess we're just asking how do we get there now about open science rather than answer the question. But
going back to what Karel was insisting on, I think fair is the way to go. So one of the things we've done now is we've worked with 2 pharma companies where we get their data without them seeing each other's data. We curate it. We we add it to our own data. And what they've been able to do with that is to find new toxicology for drugs. And this led to a Nature paper, by the way, not Elsevier. So this actually is possible. And it's not open data, but it is fair data. And we have to be very careful, I think, when we think about the corporate world, about the sensitiveness of that data, to think and emphasize fair rather than open.
Okay, any other comments? Come on, opportunity. What do people think? How are we going to make it happen?
Spread the news.
Spread the word.
It's like a gospel.
Yeah. Yes. Go and preach the non-believers. That's great. Make everyone. But I think the thing about it is what do you? I mean, this is your opportunity so that we can feed that back to the Commission. As the Commission candidates go forward to these hearings very shortly, we should be putting forward open science. There's a question at the back, is that right? Or is that somebody just holding the mic? I think it might be somebody holding the mic. Okay, I think we're coming to the end. If no one else has got any... So what we've got, how do we make it possible? Oh, great, thank you. Please contribute, thank you.
Hi, is it on?
Yeah, it is.
Great, this is Leonard Stoy, also working at the European University Association. I think it's really good the comment that Carol Leuben mentioned that EOSC now, you need to have someone within institutions, and if EOSC Secretariat can work on that maybe, because I think this is an important link now to make between EOSC and the individual research organizations, that at European level there's a lot of initiative, but we need to get it back towards the national and institutional level, so that would be great to further that these initiatives.
We're working on that.
And thank you for that.
Thank you. Okay. So no one else? So what we've got there, security, education, literacy skills, easy as possible accessibility, to tell the story, tell it well, to value in institutions, all great points of view to make this the new normal. Open science is the new normal. If there are any other comments, you can feed them back to us. But back to the panel now, towards the end. We're just coming to sum up. So, in a few words, how do we make this happen from your perspective? And what are the next steps that we need to take?
So, I guess working with sort of public sector and private sector organizations, one of the things I notice is there's usually one or two people in each group who are kind of convinced of this. And what we really need to do is help those individuals share that message within their organization. So if each person here who is convinced of the values and merits of open science is able to reach out to one person in a private sector company, a public sector institution, a research university, a research funder, publisher, who you feel could be a champion of that role, and ask them, what are the things that hold your organization back from that transition? It could be a cultural thing, it could be more of a technological thing, it could be because it's not easy enough. What are the things that hold you back? And maybe start to communicate that back with the people who are working on that within the Commission, so that they get a clearer view of how to drive change in these kinds of organizations that maybe aren't as well represented here today. And I think that might be a simple way to catalyze a little bit of movement.
Great. Jens?
It's not a question of if, it's only a question of how. And I think the best how that I hear now is the championships. We need those champions, and we need those lighthouse projects to stand out and show the way. This is my impression right now. Very short and very precise.
No, lighthouse is a beacon of hope.
Action.
Over to you, Carl.
Well, I would follow Sriya's, not one, but one person per day. So if you approach one person per day and tell them the values of open science.
What happened to make it easy?
Spread the news.
Yeah.
And it will take time. I mean, we've been talking about open access since 2003, the Berlin Declaration. Europe is something like 25-30%. Some countries are doing somewhat better, but we have to do it faster than that. We cannot wait another 30 years. It's a pity if we would do that. So just do it.
Just do it. As Nike says, just do it. And I think that's the thing, is that you all can go away from this meeting today and take that forward, to go and find one person that needs to be realising about the value of open science. And as Carol just said, not just one person for another year, one person every day. There's a challenge for you all. But I think what I would like to do is to thank the panel for their time today, and if you could show your appreciation. I think we've had a great discussion, so thank you.
Thank you.
And as always, there are people behind the scenes that you don't know who have put all this together. So I think Thomas, Roy and Jeff, could you please show your appreciation to those three, because they've been wonderful. Thank you. So look forward to seeing you again, and you can tell us about all those people, because we'll need a room, for 500 people next time you come back. So look forward to it. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.